So we're going to go ahead and get started with Tom Baker, who's joining us all the way from Sydney, Australia. And he's the man behind Mr. Black, which is a very tasty coffee liqueur. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Hi, Berlin.
So you want to start off just by telling everyone a little bit about yourself and about Mr. Black?
Yeah, sure. Pardon me. If you remember one thing about us, we make coffee and liqueur, but we're both we're a craft distillery and specialty coffee roaster. So in our distillery, we both redistill grain spirit and roast specialty coffee. And that sort of makes us a little bit unique in the world. We roast and we distill. As tempting as it would be to make gin or whiskey or anything, we
Finn's here! Hey!
Hey,
Finn. Perfect timing. All right. Excellent.
Nice to meet you. Hi.
Nice to meet you, Finn. Tom.
Corey.
As tempting as it would be to make gin at the moment, we just make coffee and liqueur. We started the company in 2012, and since then have made probably 85 or 90,000 bottles of Mr. Black, all done by hand. Everything from making the cold brew to putting the labels on and the caps on. So that affords us the time to really get it right. Yep, so that's it. Roastery and distillery that makes Mr. Black.
Cool. Finn, welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself and Cops briefly? Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Nice to having me. Yeah. Nice to having you. Sorry. I'm Finn from Cops. It's a Berlin company. It's a coffee cola nut liquor, and I start to produce it until 2012. Yeah. The story about the shot is that we produced coffee liqueur in our teenager years on a small village in Hessen. I don't know if somebody knows Hessen here, but yeah, it's in the south of Germany. So we started to make our own coffee liqueur. It was, that's the first start to make coffee liqueur. And since years after, we moved to Berlin and started after our apprenticeship as a chef. Cops with more experience and stuff. Yeah, so in 2014, we started to sell Cops over whole Germany. Yeah, that's everything about Cops. And Cops is a coffee cola nut liquor, which is more for partying and stuff, because a small shot have so much caffeine. Two of small shots also for CL have so much caffeine like an espresso. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. So I'm curious about also what kind of inspired the idea in you to start doing a coffee liqueur, and on top of it, not just any coffee liqueur, but this thought behind it.
Have you been to Australia, Cory?
No.
So in Australia, we have a long, proud tradition of stealing things from other countries. And one of those big ones is espresso culture from Italy. So pretty much after World War II, massive immigration from the Italians down to Australia, and with them they brought espresso. So we've had a really dominant Italian coffee industry in Australia since the mid-50s. There's the largest population of Italians outside of Italy in Australia, so really, really strong Italian heritage. And we just stole that and made it our own. And as a result, we have a really progressive, dynamic coffee industry. And third wave coffee is just absolutely powering in Australia, whether that's cold brew, specialty, call it what you want, it's absolutely powering. And while that was happening, and at the same time, the bar industry was changing, a lot more craft spirits, a lot more niche producers who really gave a fuck about the products that they made. And that was all happening in spirits, and coffee was going crazy, but we weren't really seeing any of that energy or love or innovation from coffee coming into the bar. And also, coffee is fucking amazing. Like, it's just the best thing ever. I drink, like, all of it, all the time, and just want to drink more at night. So we just thought, let's just get single-minded and just make a really good cold brew coffee liqueur in 2012.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense for a long time. I think, well, I mean, I always thought of coffee liqueur as something I never wanted to touch because it was disgusting. And it was something that, I couldn't even imagine who the people were who were drinking coffee liqueur. So, here's, so Finn, oh yeah, if you, yeah, unpack it. And so for you, the idea was also to create a new kind of coffee liqueur. But was it really inspired by the party culture in Berlin, or what was your thought behind starting a coffee liqueur company in 2014?
The reason was that there was no alternative to Jägermeister shorts and Berliner Luft. So, yeah, we thought there has to be a option for people don't like it, and to make party as well with a shot which has caffeine in it. So when you try it, you will see it's not a normal coffee liqueur. So it's very strong, and there are also tobacco notes in it, and it's much of alcohol in it. So normal coffee liqueur has mostly about 20% alcohol. So we have about 30. So yeah, that's a special.
I think it's really interesting, like, why people drink coffee at night, and like espresso martinis, like in Australia, massive, like highest selling cocktail in most bars. And you think like people like coffee and they like drinking, but they also like staying awake. And so I think like that's what espresso martini and coffee and liqueurs in general, it's like the perfect Friday night drink, right? Just cheaper than cocaine.
Liquid cocaine, yeah.
Now I'm curious. You said you're roasting your own coffee in-house, and you're really inspired by it, kind of the third wave, or just kind of specialty coffee movement in Australia. So, how do you pick your coffees? Like, how important is it to the flavor of your drink, kind of where your coffee comes from, and how you're sourcing it?
All the flavor in Mr. Black. What you like it? Good? People think good? Yeah. All the flavor in Mr. Black comes from coffee. So there's no other vanilla, caramel, E612, preservative. It's all from coffee. So when it's all from coffee, it's really important what coffees we use. Our coffees come from 3 to 4 different places in the world, depending on what time of the year. Could be Ethiopia, Brazil, Papua New Guinea, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, just depending on what time of year. And notionally, like without going into too much detail, we have sort of 3 broad flavors we're chasing from our coffees. The first one is that chocolatey, big chocolate sort of flavor, which is like the Maillard reaction. We go for something that's quite acidic, and then something and fruity, and then something that's quite citrusy as well. So for quite acidic coffees, you would look towards Central Africa, Kenya, Ethiopia. For something fruity, yes. So if you're looking for something really chocolatey, you look Brazil and Colombia, Nicaragua, El Salvador. And then for something super citrusy, maybe Papua New Guinea or through Asia. So we just choose our flavors of coffee to assemble the broader flavor of Mr. Black. Thankfully, being in Australia, we have such a dominant specialty coffee industry. We have the most amazing, our green bean supplier that we get it from is just, they really built the specialty coffee industry in Australia. So as a result, we have access to the best coffees in the world, all on a direct trade basis with farms, with massive reinvestment into communities overseas. So it's just the best. We get really quality coffees in Australia relatively easily, which allows us to make Mr. Black.
And Finn, are you working with someone locally for your coffee, or are you roasting it yourself as well, or where does your coffee come from?
We have our own coffee mix. It's roasted by ourselves, and yeah, that's it. But especially what kind of coffee it is, I can't tell because it's a secret. I'm sorry for that.
Fair enough. Sorry, got confused for a second. Okay, and I know you guys do a standard Mr. Blacks, but you also do some other versions. What's the idea behind that?
So pretty much the way we make Mr. Black is all blends of single origin coffees, and I should say Mr. Black is like a single origin, or it's a blend of single origin coffees, so they all come from individual farms or micro lots, just depending on what country it is and how it's consolidated. And so as a result, almost every Mr. Black, we're always making single origin coffee and liqueurs that we then blend to make Mr. Black. So, and again, because we roast coffee, we can make, and we have a distillery, and it's made 300 bottles at a time. We can make whatever the fuck we want to make, like whenever. So as a result, we tend to drip out single origin releases throughout the year. They're always very, very popular because people love to just see coffee and liqueur isn't coffee and liqueur. You know, if it comes from Kenya or Ethiopia, it tastes very different to if it comes from Brazil. So yeah, we can launch them all throughout the year, and we do. And because they taste so wildly different. I haven't got a lot, but if you stay around afterwards, we've got... This is a single origin that we did a few months ago. So there was every year there's like a coffee competitions around the world, and each year there's one in Panama called the Best of Panama, and where the geisha coffees all compete to be the best. Geisha, obviously, sort of the most coveted varietal of coffee. We'd actually bought 100 kilos of this very famous coffee before it went to auction, but before Best of Panama, and it subsequently won. So we bought all of the lot of this, so we used that to make a Panama geisha coffee and liqueur, which sold for about €150, I think. And there's only 300 bottles, and that sold out within a few hours. So yeah, so we can open that afterwards if you'd like. So yeah, I think people just find it really interesting, especially bartenders and baristas, to think coffee and liqueur doesn't just mean like Kahlua or Tia Maria or something. It can actually be bitter and nuanced and complex, and you can mix it with, Campari and sweet vermouth and make a delicious Negroni. You know, it doesn't have to be just like gluey shite.
Yeah. How did you find the reaction, Finn, when you first started introducing cups to people? Especially, like you said, people are interested in drinking Berliner Luft, Jägermeister, and so when you first showed up with a new coffee liqueur, how did people react, and how has it developed since then?
Sometimes the reaction on the product, on coffee liqueur, at first is a bit of... I don't know if I really like it because Kahlua and stuff is not that what I like. So there is a point where we have to take a message to the people that we produce coffee liqueur that's not the same as in Kahlua, and that's it's difficult, but it's okay. Yeah, it still works if you do a good communication over your, especially maybe Facebook, social media. If you show them which people like your product, the other people come and taste it as well. So yeah, I guess the point is that we have to bring the message to the people that we produce coffee liqueur that is the other one than the products, the big product players. Yeah.
Okay, same question for you, Tom.
Yeah, it's just interesting when you talk to people about coffee liqueur, they go straight to Kahlua and Tim, and they're just so bad, you know, like they're just not. I know they're selling a lot and they're very cheap, but you know, Kahlua is made with high fructose corn syrup, and they're so sweet, and I think they're just not really drunk by people below, you know, the age of 30 anymore. You know, they're just like, and I don't think anyone that like actually likes coffee is mourning the slow death of Kahlua, right? Like, no one's getting upset about that. And so, but it's a really big challenge. Like a lot of the times you go into into a bar and you say, oh, we make coffee liqueur, and they're like, oh, I don't care about that, you know, because they think you're going to show them Kahlua, you know, and then they try it, and this always happens. They always go, oh, I'm not really interested, and then you give them a taste and go, oh, fuck, that's all right, that's really interesting, you know. So it's a dog of a category, you know. It's and there's not many of us fighting the good fight for it, you know. There's only a few in every country that are actually trying to change the reputation of coffee liqueur. So yeah, it's tricky for sure.
Since you bring up Kahlua as being kind of the main thing that people always think of with coffee liqueur, and when I think of Kahlua, I think of a White Russian. So along with you guys trying to, you know, create something that's very different than the other mass-produced coffee liqueurs, do you also have any special cocktails that you especially prefer making with your liqueurs?
Yeah, I mean, nothing wrong with the White Russian. Like, I've drunk a lot of them, but I think they're just from like a previous era. You know, delicious drink. You know, you can have one or a half maybe, but they're just from another time. I think when you think of coffee as like a bitter ingredient in a cocktail, not as like a liqueur, you know, it's like a bona fide modifier in a cocktail, not as just a syrup. It really opens up the possibility to what coffee can bring to cocktails, right? So if you think like Negronis and Americanos, amazing with coffee. Like a Mr. Black Negroni, stunning. Mr. Black Americano, amazing. So all those classic bitter cocktails, like any cocktail with vermouth or Campari in, goes well with coffee. Just does, you know. But even drinks like espresso martini or Mr. Black and cold brew and tequila and agave, amazing. And coffee as a flavor goes so well with almost all other spirits, like coffee and brandy and cognac, amazing. Vodka, delicious. Tequila, mezcal. Mezcal and coffee, the smokiness of mezcal and that vegetal mixed with coffee, brilliant. Calvados, dark rum and coffee. I mean, there's a reason why most coffee liqueurs are rum-based, because rum and coffee go so... It's like such a versatile flavor to bring to coffee, to bring to cocktails. And it's really interesting, like if we have like a cocktail on the menu, like a coffee Negroni, say, in a bar, it will be the biggest selling cocktail on the menu, just because people really like coffee, you know, and they really like cocktail. You know, it's just it's a safe adventure for drinkers, and it's tasty. Yeah.
Yeah, here's the same. Yeah, all the classic coffee cocktails working with cops, but once more, especially as a shot. So yeah, the most people drink it as a shot, but also some long drinks coming up. That was special for us because we didn't thought that because you drink. Some people mix it with a bitter Coke, you know, like Fritz Cola, or don't mix it with Coca-Cola. That's not good. So yeah, but also with a ginger beer, with a spicy ginger beer and some lime juice and stuff. These are some long drinks which coming up in our space, and yeah, that's it, I guess. And for sure the normal coffee cocktails as a White Russian, B52 in Germany. I don't know if you know that. Yeah.
I've never had a B52.
I'm proud to say that I have.
Good.
Okay, cool. Well, if you guys have any questions for each other, now would be the time. Otherwise, I'd throw it to the audience.
Yeah, I love. How do you make it? Do you get? Is it cold brewed coffee, and then you mix it with grain alcohol? Like, how do you make cops?
No. It's a maceration, and we put the coffee bones, I guess, is that the word for it? Yeah, directly in the alcohol, and yeah, that's us. With cola nut, of course. It's a coffee cola nut liquor, not coffee liqueur. Yeah.
We make really... Has everyone tried cold brew coffee before? Yeah. So we make really concentrated cold brew coffee. So it's like a 1-to-4 ratio of coffee to water. So very, very concentrated. and then we blend that with Australian grain spirit. So we roast it and cold brew ourselves, but we don't ferment. So we buy in wheat spirit, and if the quality is not too good or it's got some funny flavors, we have an 11-plate column still, so we can and often do redistill if needed. But yeah, it's really concentrated cold brewed coffee mixed with Australian wheat vodka. And when we make Mr. Black, it's never filtered, especially when you make cold brew. Coffee is like solids dissolved in a liquid, right? So when you filter, you strip and remove flavor. So we don't filter. We use a process from winemaking and brewing, cold racking. So you just chill it down and then extract the liquid that way. So it's unfiltered, cold brewed coffee liqueur. Yeah.
Well, are there any questions from the audience then? Yeah?
I was just curious, you were talking about why people like espresso martinis, but it's definitely a trend that's come back in the last 2 years. Why do you think that came back? Because, it's a cocktail that was born in the 80s, and then suddenly it's the thing everyone's drinking.
Espresso martinis thrive where the coffee is good. So if you look in the US, so Dick Bradsell, 1989, invented, obviously, the teeny culture, apple teeny, espresso martini in the US. That drink was destroyed in the United States by the poor quality coffee. So even though it was invented with espresso, bartenders at second and third tier bars were just using American coffee, right? Which hasn't got a great reputation. So recently, with the sort of resurgence of good quality coffee, whether that be cold brew or whether that be even Nespresso or espresso, the resurgence of good coffee has meant that you can make good espresso martinis. And interesting, like if you think, I know it's a drink that bartenders in the trade has a interesting relationship with, but if you think about an espresso martini, like if it's good fresh espresso, a good coffee liqueur, a strong pokey vodka, and 7.5 mils of sugar syrup, like that's a beautiful drink, that's coffee forward, it's bittersweet, it looks visually, stunning, it's very easy to slightly tweak, so I think, that sort of resurgence in sort of mixology and good bartending coming back, and also good coffee has meant that drink has still, and maybe the rising price of cocaine potentially.
Any other questions?
I guess I just have a very general question. Do you ever see coffee-based cocktails becoming like a standard go-to, or is it always going to be in? I think this is from Tom. I think you said it like it is kind of like a niche product. You think it's going to stay, or is it with the rise of, say, you talk about specialty coffee stores as it becomes a little bit more mainstream? Do you think maybe that'll filter in to your product?
If you think about what liquids people drink during the day, like people aren't drinking like agave juice at breakfast, like people drink a lot of coffee, and it's a flavor that people inherently understand. So we're just massive advocates for bars putting on more coffee cocktails because coffee's delicious, and it just sells well. So whether that's Mr. Black or not, we just kind of just know that there should be more coffee cocktails in bars. It's like they invented the espresso martini, and then just stopped. It's like, that'll do. So I think what we're like massive advocates for is more bars making different coffee cocktails and just devoting one spot on an 8-spot menu to a coffee drink, whether that uses us or not. And I get it, we're expensive, like 30 quid a bottle, like it's not cheap, so it's not for everyone. But that doesn't mean you can't make delicious, tasty coffee cocktails that don't work in every venue. Does that answer your question?
Because, for example, right, like I by your accent, I'm guessing you're from Australia, which
That's
is where I grew
correct.
up. Right? And there, right, coffee's had quite a high standard for a long time. But I live now in Berlin, and here, more and more people are getting into good quality coffee. And so what I'm saying is, like, for me, if I go out into a club and I say, oh, you know, this is a really good quality drink that's being offered in terms of coffee, because I'm used to that high standard in terms of coffee, I'm more likely now to be like, I want to purchase that drink. Do you think that kind of thing is going to filter?
Yes, I've got you. 100%, yeah. So I think the rising standard of like, well, we're in third wave right now. Like people just, I mean, everyone still drinks Nescafe or whatever, but now people, at least when they drink Nescafe, go, well, that's cool. I also know what a single origin Chemex pour over tastes like, you know? So, yeah, no, massively. I think it's that beautiful point where you saw mixology and coffee culture growing up at the same time. And so coffee is having its absolute renaissance. I'm not sure about what's happening in Berlin, but, you know, like all where I've seen, like all throughout, you know, France and the UK and Australia, it's massive, right? So I think we're just seeing that happening in the bar as well. Yeah, but of course, yeah, massively. Yeah.
Okay, I think everyone's getting some samples of cups passed around to them now, so maybe there's some questions for Finn.
Hi. First of all, we actually work for Kahlua. So it's, no, but that said, we think it's wonderful the work that you're doing, because you're really opening up the door and making coffee liqueur more artisanal. It's more interesting, reaching new types of bartenders. That's truly amazing. But I'd like to understand, you know, hear from you, what do you think at least Kahlua has made from a category perspective, and the history that we've hopefully brought something positive to it. Just one really small correction, we're not using high fructose corn syrup
In
anymore.
EU, not, but in the US as well? I'm glad you've seen the error of your ways. Yes. That's good.
I'm not sure that I got the question. Could you
No,
please?
it was more from a heritage point of view and a category point of view. What do you think Kahlua has meant from the past, and how do you see the future moving within coffee liqueur as a category? Will there be room for many of us, and will there be room for more artisanal coffee liqueurs in the future?
I guess coffee liqueur is the one thing that actually startups not focused yet. So I guess there is a lot of space to do more, especially in this shot area. So I guess because our case is that we produce a shot that wakes you up. Yeah. So yeah, I guess this products have a future, especially for partying. Yeah, that's it.
I just think it's like, what side of history do you want to be on as Kahlua, right? And like, it was a drink with a time and a place, and it did its thing. And would we have an espresso martini without Tia Maria? Probably not. Maybe. But it's my biggest gripe with Kahlua is you're actively trying to pull people out of coffee, as opposed to showing them what a beautiful world that coffee is. And if you think about like the coffee bean as this like world-changing tiny little bit of fucking brilliance that everyone wakes up to every day, we try and celebrate that in the bar, right? That's all we do. We're just evangelistic about bartenders making better coffee drinks. And then Kahlua launches salted caramel or pumpkin spice, which is fine. You can do that if you want to make money off 14-year-old girls in America. Fine. It's just not the types of bars I go to. So yeah, for sure. We do. There are a lot of bars that. What's the best way to say it? We don't actively take like Kahlua's volume in a lot of bars. It's not like, oh, they'll use us. Like you can't make a Negroni with Kahlua, right? It just doesn't work. And equally, if someone like we're 2.5 times the price, So for a volume bar in an espresso martini, yeah, it's I can't get that past the ops director. So yeah, I think it was interesting and we're just seeing what Tia Maria doing, like actually showing some leadership in terms of coffee drinks as opposed to pumpkin spice flavor. I think that would probably mean I would have less vitriol towards Kahlua. If it was like being more proactive for coffee. Yeah. Does that answer? Sort of. Yeah.
Who doesn't want to make money off of 14-year-old American girls?
45-year-old. Yeah, is that closer? Yeah. Yeah.
Do we have any more questions from the audience?
Hi, I notice a lot more coffee cocktails even at shows like this, and using cold brew, like regular cold brew with spirits, which is great because it's giving attention to the whole coffee cocktail area. But do you think there's a danger, the more people embrace cold brew coffee mixing with spirits, that coffee liqueurs, no matter how good they are, will be sidelined again into a particular type of cocktail if people are going straight to mixing regular cold brew with spirits?
Yeah, for sure. But I think that could be said by almost any modifier out there. You know, it's like plantation pineapple. Does that mean if people start, they can buy pineapple juice? You know what I mean? So it's like there's an ease and accessibility point. And I think you can make delicious cocktails with cold brew, like Tim Phillips, Bulletin Place in Sydney, Don Julio Tequila, cold brew. Yeah, just and smoked agave. You know, amazing drink. Doesn't use Mr. Black. Really solid coffee drink. Tim has access to really amazing cold brew from his local cafe, so that works for him. But venues that don't have access to amazing, or just frankly couldn't be bothered to make amazing cold brew every day, yet still want to make a Coffee Boulevardier, for instance, because they like money and they like happy customers. For sure. So I think there's that convenience point as well. Just in general, like bars should have cold brew, and we're seeing it a lot in Australia. Like most bars have cold brew coffee as a staple, as like, because you get 8-week shelf life. It tastes better in espresso martini. So yeah, for sure. Ironically, the best thing to mix Mr. Black with for a long drink is cold brew coffee. So in the same way that people put Kahlua in their coffee in 1961, people put Mr. Black in, I'm sure they still do now, but yeah, that was like the serve for Kahlua, right? People now put Mr. Black in cold brew. So yeah. Opinion on cocktails?
All right. Oh, yep.
So, a couple of months ago, there was a cocktail competition I tried to participate in. And one of my biggest obstacles was finding coffee bitter, which at the moment, from what I've seen, it's very hard to find. And actually, the most popular one is the one from Cocktail Kingdom, which, to be perfectly honest, is not the greatest in the world. It's very high in alcohol, very bitter, well, not bitter in the good way. Which is, my following question is, would you actually try to expand and try to make coffee bitters, since there is almost none in the market at the moment?
Yeah, like Angostura coffee. Coffee bitters, like we've made them before. Coffee is this. There's a reason why most people use coffee extracts, and coffee, like Patron, for instance, don't make cold brew or anything. They buy in a coffee extract because coffee's a really hard flavor to work with. You can't concentrate it easily with distillation. So a lot of distillers are macerate or not redistilled. So it's a tricky thing to work with. Practically, we don't make it because you'd sell a few hundred bottles of coffee bitters a year, and we have made it before, but it's just, yeah, I mean, we have it in Australia, so you're more than welcome to come down and try some of ours. But it's, not really something that, we're a liqueur company. Yeah. It's just a tricky thing to make is the reason why, it's also a reason why I don't think there are a lot of New World coffee and liqueurs, because everyone makes cold brew and they put grain alcohol in it and they put sucrose in it and it tastes like shit. And then they go and make something else. So gin, probably. So, yeah, it's a tricky one.
Hey there. In your book right here, you've got a list of 3 coffee beans. Are they the only 3 coffee beans you actually use? Because when you talked about the different things, you talked about getting them from all over and the seasonal stuff. So can you actually say that bottle of Mr. Black's has that blend of coffee in it, unless it's a single origin speciality?
I can on my Excel document, but on our new website, you'll be able to punch in your batch number and tell you what beans were in it.
It changes depending on
Yeah,
seasons and what
probably
you-
it would change. We would use 10 different coffees in a given year. The best way to think about it is we kind of know what flavour we want Mr. Black to taste like, so we assemble the different coffees underneath, and a lot of quite interchangeable, but often terrible as well. You know, you get something from Nicaragua, you make it, and you've got $2,000 worth of this cold brew sitting there.
So effectively, you're using coffee like you would blend a single malt.
Exactly the
That
same
kind of
thing.
thing.
And it's assembled in a really similar way.
And
you know,
the
you've kind of got
consumers-
you've got really robust big ones, you've got your light little ones. It's exactly the same thing.
And
Yeah.
the consumer's kind of okay with that as long as they know that they trust you, that the best coffee's going into it. And
Yeah,
you're the blender
I hope
and
so.
you're the one
As long
that
as it
does
tastes good, I think people are pretty stoked. Yeah.
All right. Anyone else? No? All right. Well, then, thank you very much for joining
Thank
us
you,
today, guys. A big round of applause for these two, please.